t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as pas manqué, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello there and welcome to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly talk show that takes a look at the news brewing here in Brussels and beyond. I'm Maeve McMahon. Coming up this weekend marks 2 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The events shocked Europe and saw an outcry of support for Ukrainians that are losing their lives fighting for their land and also for European values. 24 months on, we take a look at the war that changed the EU as we know it. And after months of suspense, the cat is out of the bag. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced her wish to run for 5 more years. The German centre-right incumbent Commission President made her pitch in Berlin on Monday. We get reactions and hear why the 65-year-old has no desire to retire. Let's meet our panel this week. Sergei Lagondinsky, MEP from the Green Party. Lisa Bezvershenko, Advocacy Coordinator at Promote Ukraine. And Ricardo Borges de Castro, Associate Director at the European Policy Centre.
Good to see you.
Good to see you all. Thank you so much for being with us. But as always, before we hear your thoughts, let's just hear how that full-scale invasion of Ukraine shocked Brussels.
It was one of the biggest ever wake-up calls for the EU. Even though Ukraine has been at war since 2014, it was the 24th of February 2022 that shook the EU to its core. From weaning off cheap Russian gas to putting enlargement back on the table, it took the full-scale invasion for Europe to realize it would also have to learn to defend itself. 2 years on, as Ukrainians and Russians lose their lives on the battlefield, we take a look at this changed Europe and ask if it will be better prepared for the next security shock.
So what would you all say? What would you all say? Is Europe now better prepared? And how has the war changed the EU as we know it?
I think Europe is better prepared. It's always a matter of comparison. Watching this very moving sequence, you understand how much we have changed since the 2 years. And I think the changes in terms of our institutional relationship also with Ukraine and our understanding what the meaning and the role of Ukraine and Ukrainian people is for us. It's tremendous. And let's not forget, just 2 years ago, we were still in Germany, we were still pumping Russian gas and using Russian oil. That has changed. And this is a tremendous and a foundational change that we have accomplished.
Isn't it a shame, though, Ricardo, that it took such a shock in order for such unity?
I mean, to a certain extent, yes. And I think, nevertheless, that the EU is a little bit of a slow learner. I would say that, are we really prepared for another security scare in the next 3, 5, 10 years? I mean, when will this happen? And because I think a lot of the decisions that we need to take, that would need to be taken today, they're just slow in coming. So I think we need really to wrap our minds around what the challenge, the real challenge that we are facing. Also, that it is now compounded by the US elections in November that could complicate things in Europe. But we should do this for our own self-interest and first and foremost to support Ukrainians and Ukraine in this fight against Russia.
And Lisa, of course, you're sitting here with us, which is great to have you for this grim milestone. How do you feel the support has been for Ukraine and the response from the European Union? And are you worried now that the war has been somewhat normalised?
Unfortunately, I think, first of all, it's not 2 years, it's 10 years since Ukraine is resisting Russian military aggression. And unfortunately, indeed, it took 8 years for Europe to understand the real threat. And this, I agree with Ricardo, this is very slow. And indeed, the EU made some steps to be more independent, energy independent, some sanctions, but we see that it's still not enough. Ukrainians are dying every day, and we saw in the video what is the impact of Russia, what is the real impact. And I'm very scared that the war is normalized. This is the European war, but the only one country is fighting against it.
So what should be prioritised now? Sending weapons or peace negotiations?
absolutely no peace negotiations. There is no negotiations with terrorists. We have an experience of 10 years trying to negotiate with Russia, and you see the result of it. What is the priority for the EU is, first of all, fast weapon delivery. We are very grateful for all the support, but the time is crucial because for us, time means human lives. And maybe the EU citizens think that it is expensive to support Ukraine, but what is a cost of human life?
And just a few days in, as well after hearing about the horrific death of Alexei Navalny, we learnt about a Russian defector that was killed in Alicante. Sergei, is this conflict now entering the EU?
Well, this conflict has been in the EU for many years. Let's not forget a Chechen former rebel leader who was killed in the center of Berlin, and where the murder is now in prison in Berlin. We had poisoning in the United Kingdom, etc., etc. So I don't think there is a change from that perspective. But yes, we have seen and are seeing again and again the proof of the nature of the regime in Kremlin. And this is what we're seeing now. Now Putin has nothing to lose anymore, and he's showing the real face of the system. And that is what we have to be prepared for, and the best way to be prepared is to support Ukrainians. And this is something that we have re-emphasized during the Munich Security Conference last weekend. How do you go about this? You go about this by making faster and more substantial our military aid to Ukraine. Unfortunately, we have some structural problems on doing so, and not just a political will problem.
I mean, if I can, the central question, we just launched our EPC Outlook paper. And the central question that we ask is the EU doing enough to support Ukraine? And I think the numbers show us that it's not doing enough. I mean, it's doing a lot, but it's not doing enough, and certainly is not doing it fast enough. I mean, let's go back to the issue of fossil fuels. It's true that we have consumed less fossil fuels from Russia, but if we look at support to Ukraine, it's at 138.3 billion euros since the war started. EU fossil fuels acquisition since the war started, it's at 187 billion. So look at these numbers. Are we doing enough? My answer is no.
And there was an interesting poll as well out this week by the European Council for Foreign Relations that said that only 1 in 10 Europeans, Lisa, feel that Ukraine can actually defeat Russia. Would you agree with this very pessimistic outlook? They said that the factors were linked to Ukraine's failed counteroffensive and a potential US policy shift.
But let's ask, is it actually Ukraine's fault that Ukraine is not winning this war now? Because I would like to remind everyone that Russia is 140 million population and Ukraine is 40 million population, 10 of which is refugees, displaced people. And we have by far the most, one of the most capable and qualified armies in the world to fight back such a strong army as Russia has. And also I want to remind all the successes that the Ukrainian army did. We won the battle of Kyiv, the main goal of Putin. We won the battle of Kharkiv. We got Kherson back. We got the Snake Island back. We got Sumy, Chernihiv Oblast back. It is more than 50% that Ukraine deoccupied of territories in this invasion. So let's maybe focus on what Ukrainian army did. And I think because the war is so normalized and there is this war fatigue, but I remind there is no EU citizens fighting in this war, but Ukrainians are protecting the EU citizens.
Well, the EU, I mean, we saw this week, they did agree on their 13th package of sanctions against Russia. We saw Josep Borrell, the EU Foreign Affairs chief, tweeting that 200 people and entities will be added to that blacklist. I mean, the role here as well, fighting circumvention. Will these sanctions do anything, Sergei, or is it just really symbolic to mark this?
I think symbolic markers are always important, and we should not forget about that when we talk about sanctions. Many people say sanctions do not work the way we wanted that. I agree with that. Also because of circumvention of sanctions, also because of the new world order that Russia, together with China, have been able to regroup the countries. But these sanctions are civilizational. They show where the red line is for us in terms of our engaging with a power that is an aggressive power vis-à-vis our interests. And by the way, Ukrainians are doing a lot. I just wanted to add one more thing. Ukrainians are taking care of the grain streams to the rest of the world by taking out a substantial amount of Black Sea fleet of Russia. This is something that the rest of the world should understand and should also show some gratitude towards the courage and inventiveness of Ukrainian people. So when the global South is now trying to flirt with Putin, they should not forget that Ukrainians are firmly on the side of that part of the world.
Well, I think there's a lot of disinformation right out there. I mean, the information people are getting about everything is completely inaccurate.
I mean, but if there is this information, there needs to be leadership. There needs to be political leadership from the European leaders to actually explain what we're trying to achieve. And I also don't think that European leaders have wrapped their minds around exactly what we're trying to achieve in Ukraine. And I think that this is an issue that has to do with the fact that there is ambivalence. There are countries. I mean, if I would use this expression, I don't think that there's fatigue. Maybe there's some fatigue among Europeans. There is certainly fatigue among some European leaders. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them are fatigued and they are weak as well because they are not responding to this problem, I believe, with the strength and with the determination and the resolve that they should be answering.
Fatigued and corrupt, if we talk about Orban.
Yeah, okay.
Who was not around the table.
But that's, I mean, but the issue...
That's a special
But that's not useful because Orban is also a very nice scapegoat to hide what others are not doing. So I think, Orban is very important.
And one day we would love to have Viktor Orban around the table to speak for himself, because his name is often mentioned here, but unfortunately he hasn't been with us yet. But just to go back to the fact that it is election time coming up, and Europeans are feeling the pinch as well in their pocket, and they were hoping that perhaps the Russian economy would be really hurting now from these sanctions, which is not really the case. It seems to be quite resilient, no, Lisa?
Yeah, but even now we see German and Italian component in Russian weapons. So how can we talk about if sanctions work whilst we find Western suppliers in the drones that kill Ukrainians almost every day? There is still not enough done in terms of sanctions. There is still oil, there is still LNG, there is still gas, there is diamonds, there is steel, and this is huge industries that are not penalized enough, and there is also not enough of financial support. For example, Belgium, they only send 0.06 or 8% of their GDP, whilst some countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they send 1 or more than 1% of their GDP for military support of Ukraine.
Well, just back to here, I mean, we do know that the full-scale invasion of Ukraine was a major wake-up call here in Europe about the risks of depending too much and doing business with certain illiberal economies. And 2 years on, we've seen that Russian gas imports have dropped from 40% in 2021 to about 8% in 2023. And just for more on that angle of things, we caught up with the energy expert Jaume Loffredo. He works for the European Consumer Organisation.
Now there is a lot more pressure to produce our own energy compared to the past, and this is actually a good news because energy independence means relying more on renewable energy. The safest and most secure energy that we can use is the energy that we don't use. Here there are some positive stories because again the demand for heat pumps or the demand for insulation or for solar panels, it skyrocketed. I mean. At every family dinner, people were talking about heat pumps, about solar panels, and this was not happening in the past. Consumers will continue demanding those products while helping and supporting the energy transition, and at the same time, the industry will be ready to deliver.
Jaume Loffredo there saying the safest and most secure energy is the energy that we don't use. But just to go back to what you mentioned earlier, Sergei, was this dependence we had on a cheap Russian oil for decades. I mean, how hard was it to wean off that addiction?
And this is one of the points where I think something positive has changed. We are thinking geopolitically about our not just the energy supply but also supply chains, about certain technological instruments. We have enacted the so-called CHIPS Act, where we are encouraging production of chips that are important digital equipment here in Europe. And this is just one part. We discussed this also in the Munich Security Conference. One part of strategic raw materials and technologies that we want to either get back or secure. And this is, von der Leyen came to power, became president with this geopolitical promise. And I think this herself and Mr. Putin helped us to get more geopolitical during this 5 terms, and I think this will continue.
And indeed, for the first time ever, Europeans all across were looking at their electricity bills and their energy bills, whereas in the past they probably didn't even look at them. Do you really think this conversation is happening, though, about installing heat pumps? Just briefly, Ricardo.
I mean, I haven't had this conversation, but I do see that there is a proliferation of solar panels around. I live in a very tall building in Brussels, and I see the proliferation of solar panels everywhere. But I still think, I mean, I would say that although these are good examples, and as Sergei was just mentioning, there's a new policy paradigm sort of permeating many of our policies, which we also discuss in the Outlook paper, which is securitization. So the problem now, what I think European leaders want to secure over the past winters, is that people have access to energy to keep their houses warm and have lights on. So I think, the paradigm is to a certain extent, although sustainability is very important, but now I think energy security is more important.
The lights on, of course, that is indeed a priority. And just another plot change, of course, that happened here in the EU over the last 2 years was that it put EU enlargement right back on the map, whereas a couple of years ago we wouldn't have imagined seeing certain countries right there on actually written down as countries that could potentially join the European Union. But now they have actually, the Commission has opened accession talks with Ukraine and Moldova. A similar recommendation has been made for Bosnia on the condition that it reaches certain criteria. And meanwhile, Georgia has been granted candidate status. So Lisa, of course, we're looking at you here. This is obviously hugely symbolic. But then earlier this week as well, Ursula von der Leyen at a press conference implied that the talks with Ukraine could be delayed. Are you disappointed with that?
Delayed? Why? I mean, of course, there is a lot. There is a lot of things that have to be done in Ukraine. There is, of course, a lot of reform, and imagine reforming the country at war. We need a lot of financial support. We need a lot of qualified specialists to do all the reforms. For us, these accession negotiations are a big boost of morale, and you probably see me smiling because it's really something good. In these 2 years, it's a horrific tragedy. I cannot put it in words how much pain we suffer. But this is that hope that we need, and I think Europe needs hope as well to see a better future, and then but not only hope there should be also a vision, a clear vision how the countries will access the EU, and I think now the EU needs Ukraine, especially for its security dimension.
Sergei or Ricardo?
I mean, I fully agree. I think, but even if, although, I mean, things will slow down naturally because there will be European Parliament elections. So, I mean, it will maybe the enlargement, or maybe enlargement might not slow down, but it will be less in the spotlight because a lot of the work that needs to be done is actually done, around tables and screening and this type of work that needs to happen. But I think the political signal is there, and it's also a geopolitical message. Bringing Ukraine and these countries into the EU is a geopolitical and geostrategic decision as well. It is about reforms. It is about these countries changing. It is about these countries. But I think all Ukrainians want that, like all Portuguese would want to be a part of the EU, to have our standards on par with the EU. But this is something that is there, really, I think, the process. Of course, we know that it takes time. We know that it's not going to be an easy one. And here again, we're going to need leadership.
Yes. Final comment from you there on that?
Leadership, geostrategy, I agree with all that. What we should not lose sight of is, of course, that we're not just a geopolitical union. We are also a union of values. Yeah. And that's why the reforms of ourselves will be a prerequisite for any expansions. This is our chance. This is the chance that Ukrainians are giving us to start thinking about how to change ourselves in order to be able to absorb them.
But I just hope that this does not become an impediment to actually move ahead with the enlargement process. So I think we need to be politically very careful about this.
Like what you said earlier, the EU is a slow learner, Ricardo Borges de Castro. Well, I'm afraid I will have to stop you there because we have run out of time. But if you want more in-depth coverage on that 2 years milestone, you can check out our website, www.euronews.com. We also have extensive coverage on Euronews all weekend. But for now, we have to take a very short break. But after it, we'll be telling you why Ursula von der Leyen has no wish to move out of her residence, which is the Berlaymont, the headquarters of the European Commission. See you soon. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekend talk show, where we're taking a look back at the news of the week. Now, the big story that made ripples through European political circles here was Ursula von der Leyen's announcement to run again for Commission President. She shared the news in Berlin on Monday at a meeting with the CDU, her Christian Democrats party.
Today, 5 years later, I am making a very conscious and well-considered decision. I want to run for a second term, and I am very grateful to the CDU for presenting me today as the Spitzenkandidat for the EPP.
Chances are high that she will be the next Commission President, but she'll need to get a majority in the European Parliament and be different things to different parties in order for them to vote for her. So I guess this is not really a surprise, this news, but what is your reaction to it, Sergei?
We've been all expecting. I think it's good for our democracy to have this clarity because there was a lot of talk and uncertainty on how this will go. I think another point which is important is that by doing so, she will kind of repair the damage that was done by her first nomination, which basically broke the whole system of Spitzenkandidaten. And now this is kind of a late attempt to bring back the trust of voters by saying, I am running. Unfortunately, she's not running for the parliament. This is a little deficit in that. She's not a candidate on a German list. But the fact that she is now announcing her to be a Spitzenkandidat candidate, I think this is a step forward.
And many analysts this week were saying that she has given the European Union a face and Brussels a face. Would you agree with that, Lisa? And how important is that?
For me, as a Ukrainian, it is very important. I think during the past 2 years, she was really a political leader. She visited Ukraine many times. She was on the forefront of this enlargement process of the big Ukraine support plan of 50 billion euros. So I think for us it's really important to have someone really vocal, supportive and democratic.
And her term, of course, Ricardo, as you know, was marked by Brexit, COVID, war, the energy crisis, inflation, and she'll have lots more challenges in the future as well, I'm sure, if you look into that you put together.
I mean, I think she has been, over the past mandate, let's say, the crisis manager in chief. And I think now I think she would do this. I think her second mandate was written in the stars because she would need to be able to feel that she actually has accomplished something. On a long-term vision, she would need to have a second mandate. Otherwise, it would feel like unfinished business. So I think it makes a lot of sense that she puts herself for a second mandate. I think she has a very good, a very likelihood. Of course, it will depend on the result of the European Parliament elections. But I think she has a good chance of becoming the president of the Commission, which I think it also ensures that there'll be some continuity. And I think stability.
Well, that's a word. In fact, I heard a lot of people were like, stability is good, and we can bring in as well now some more reactions on this and hear how more MEPs feel about the announcement. We can listen to the Lithuanian MEP, Andrius Kubilius, from her political party, and the Austrian MEP from your party, Thomas Waits.
Well, she was in the leadership, really, in moral, emotional, and whatever, and personal leadership of that EU response, which was unexpectedly really strong and effective, I would say.
If you look closer also what is going on within her own party, because unfortunately her own Conservative Party turned their back to the Green Deal, actually attacked the Green Deal from within, and unfortunately parts of the Conservatives have decided that they invest into cooperation with the far right.
Well, will she have to do a U-turn on the policies of the Green Deal in order to satisfy her own party and other parties, of course, that are further to the right?
Well, this will be the key question that we will be discussing after the elections. Of course, we will have a different dynamics in the parliament with probably right-wing conservative and right-wing extreme wing growing. And with that, it will be very tempting for her as well to rely more on those voices. But there is also a shift within the Conservative Party, EPP, European People's Party now, and also among some liberals who are playing the tune of we having over over-regulated through the Green Deal, and that we should walk back on the Green Deal project. This is something that would be extremely unfortunate, because all the visionary leadership that she had shown was really connected, on the one hand, to the geopolitical issues, on the other hand, on this Green Deal project. And for her, dismantling her own legacy would be something which would be also very hurtful for her role as a historical figure.
And she can't anger the farmers too much, of course.
But
protests are very much ongoing.
Doing policy and making decisions, sometimes you need to anger someone. And I think, again, here you also need, leadership and strategy. I think it would be a mistake if she does that. I mean, I'm a person from the center-right, and I don't think that we should water down. I mean, maybe you can change some of the policies, some of the regulations that have been implemented. Maybe they need to be rethought. But the problem is there. The climate crisis is not going to go away. And the last 10 years have been the warmest on record. So we need really to think very seriously about this problem. And also, she doesn't really want to alienate all the young generation that is really concerned about this issue. So I think, a politician nowadays, if they want to be successful, and at her level, she needs to have an answer to these problems.
And does she, do you think, in your eyes?
And I think that we are very grateful for her support, that she said that we will support Ukraine as long as it takes. But I really want that during her next period as a president of European Commission, that we support Ukraine until it wins.
Until it wins the war, until the war ends. And just on the Spitzencandidate process, which is, of course, the idea of having a lead face for each political group, is that now dead in the water?
Why? Every party now, every European party has a Spitzenkandidaten and has the face, and in many cases those candidatures are also linked to ambition to become either president of the Commission or a commissioner. So I don't think so. I think that we're getting back to that. I know that some Social Democrats have doubts on whether this is the right way to go, but structurally I think we are back in the Spitzenkandidaten dynamics, and I think this is the right thing, because otherwise it's very difficult to explain to the voters what will and why will happen after the elections.
And just very briefly, Ricardo, because you used to work for José Manuel Barroso, a former Commission President, bring us inside the Berlaymont building, and why does Ursula want to stay there so long?
Well, that I don't know, because I would not want to live on the 13th floor of the Berlaymont, although it has very beautiful views over Brussels, but I would not want to live in that building for sure.
But indeed, it is a very intense job, and we will keep you posted on all that, because of course we'll hear more on that in Bucharest in a couple of weeks when the European People's Party gather and officially endorse her as their candidate. But for now, we have run out of time. Thank you so much to our panel for being with us, and thank you so much for tuning in. Stay with us here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon, and along with Sergei Lagondinsky, Ricardo Borges de Castro and Lisa Bezvershenko, we're just taking a look through the news of the week. And as you know, and as you can see, this weekend marks 2 full years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine that saw millions of Ukrainians flee their country in search of safety. For the first time ever, the EU used an emergency tool that gave the right to work, health, education, shelter and financial support for 3 years. To hear now how the Ukrainian community here in Brussels is doing and if they're homesick, we had coffee with Alexandra Kobernich from Kyiv.
I'm often homesick, and especially February is the month of the phantom pain, which we all feel, since this will be 24th of February will mark the second, not anniversary, but the second year of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And we built a strong Ukrainian community. We are immensely grateful for all of the support we receive, for this people-to-people approach, for the connections. But I know that with time, people tend to also forget very dangerous things, and we still need the strong level of awareness and support of what's going on in Ukraine.
Alexander Kobernich there, who arrived back in 2022, reminding people not to forget about Ukraine and about her people. How do you feel now, Lisa? Are people as nice and kind and welcoming as they were 2 years ago?
I think, first of all, when Ukrainian Ukrainians arrived to Europe, they felt, of course, it's not possible to feel at home in any other place than home, but we felt welcomed, we felt a part of European family, and we are a part of European family. I think we are still feeling welcomed. I still see the solidarity and support with Ukrainians. The other thing is what to do with 6 million Ukrainians that are in the EU. Of course, the temporary protection is going, has to be reviewed at some point. And for Ukraine, this is a question, where are our people, what they are doing, and will they come back?
Well, of course, will they come back? Because as you said, there are 6 million. The majority are in Germany and Poland and then the Czech Republic. And the question is, will they go back home whenever there is peace in their country?
It's up to these people to decide. I think our goal as host societies is to make all the chances open for them. And to be honest, it's in both interests, and both the Ukrainian interest and also still EU small interests. We also need people who are qualified, people who are interested in participating in creative approach to labor market, etc., etc. This is also our chance. But yes, we should be, of course, cautious about the fact that if these people, all of them, remain in the European Union, this will be also a blow to the Ukrainian society. But as I said, this is a challenge and a decision to the Ukrainian society, and our responsibility is to support Ukrainians both here and at home as much as we can.
I mean, assuming that there will be peace, and when there is peace, if the conditions are created, I think many Ukrainians, as I think Lisa was just saying, will want to go home. I mean, I think they should. My message is, please feel at home here because we welcome you. But I also understand that if they would want to go back and help the reconstruction of their country, because that's our next project. I mean, if we want to look into the future, it's a political process of enlargement, and it's a reconstruction of Ukraine. This is going to be fundamental, and it's going to need all of us to be part of that, but particularly Ukrainians. But I agree with Sergei. I mean, they should decide by themselves what's the next step for their life.
And let's not forget that the fact that we have so many Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian presence now amongst our society has changed a lot on how Europeans view Ukraine. Ukraine is back on the map, also on cultural and geopolitical map, and this is also a huge asset.
There is a lot of Ukrainians in every European city, and this weekend there is a lot of solidarity events. So I encourage our viewers in all big European cities to join, to show their solidarity and stand up for Ukraine, how Ukraine stands up for Europe.
Okay, Lisa Bezvershenko, thank you so much for being with us. And Sergei Laguninsky, thank you so much to you too. And also to Ricardo Borges de Castro.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments for us, do reach out. Our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. We're also on social media. See you soon and take care.